So our plan for this area eventually, when we get our invasive species kind of under control at this site, is that it will be a little bit of a demonstration area so that people can imagine what this site would have looked like 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago or 200 years ago. Many of these invasive species on the site are very, very recent arrivals on the scene in terms of the bluegrass. If you were to go back certainly 1,000 years ago, but even 500 or 200 years ago, you would not be seeing bush honeysuckle, garlic mustard, and winter creeper here. So we want to give people a little bit of an idea of what it would have looked like if they were able to sort of time travel back to the bluegrass forest of, a long time ago. So it's really an educational resource for us here, more so than a land management project. We are a park that's open to the public. We're open essentially all year round, all day, every day, 7 days a week. So we have a lot of human-related impacts. We have about 50,000 to 60,000 visitors per year, and that can mean that Raven Run is at times almost loved to death. It makes it very easy for invasive species to spread, and it makes it very difficult for us to get them under control.
Invasive species can be a significant forest health management concern. When you have invasive plants on a landscape, they can drastically change the biodiversity and composition of your stand. Smaller plants, seedlings from valuable tree species such as oaks, hickories, and maples, cannot regenerate in areas where there is a dense overstory of invasive plants such as bush honeysuckle. And in areas where winter creeper or garlic mustard has crept in and taken over the understory of those stands, it's very difficult for spring ephemerals and for other herbaceous plants that are native to that area to gain any traction and to regenerate in those stands. They also can reduce wildlife habitat and food sources for birds and other animals, and can reduce biodiversity in the soil and microbial layers as well by limiting the diversity of plant life that is found in those areas.
Garlic mustard is probably the species that we focus on with the greatest intensity right after bush honeysuckle. Garlic mustard is much easier to remove, and it's pretty easy to identify as well. Here in January, really all you're going to be seeing is these, basil leaves that are very low to the ground. They're really the only thing that's green and very noticeable on the forest floor right now. But if you were to come back in the spring, they are going to be a fairly tall plant, a couple feet tall, with small white flowers on them. And the way that we deal with garlic mustard out here is that we just come in and we pull it out and we bag it up and we just throw it away with the garbage. Garlic mustard survives for a long time in the seed bed, and so this is something that we need to get after year. We have a pretty intensive management plan for it in the same areas of the park year after year, because if you miss a year and they've gone to seed and you get more seeds in the seed bed, then you've kind of undone a lot of your work from previous years. So we really try to be very strategic and very focused in the way that we remove garlic mustard. And this is going to be a site that will need that moving forward, because we've removed the bush honeysuckle in this site and now we're having garlic mustard move in. So it might be a couple-year project to kind of get this garlic mustard under control. And that's all right. It's really not one of the worst invasives to remove. It comes up pretty easily. We are fortunate to have a lot of volunteers come out here and work on the garlic mustard. But if we weren't to remove it, it is something that's going to cover the entire forest floor. It's going to outcompete things that are native that might want to come in, and it's pretty much going to just be, a monoculture of garlic mustard underneath these trees where we've removed the bush honeysuckle. Bush honeysuckle is definitely our top invasive in terms of like the acreage that it impacts out here. We also have multiflora rose that's coming up in spots. And we do have somewhat of an issue with Bradford pear, although we do find that that is one that's easier to control because it tends to pop up in the middle of the field, and then we can be like, oh, I see you out there, and just go out and take care of it. So invasive species is a big one, especially with, kind of all the human impact that occurs on the site. It makes it really sort of invasive species friendly.
In addition to invasive plants such as garlic mustard or bush honeysuckle, there are also invasive insects that can significantly impact the health of our forests and woodlands. Emerald ash borer is a classic example of this. It's a small, tiny green beetle that was first detected in the U.S. in the early 2000s, and since then it has swept through great portions of the eastern U.S., killing ash trees, primarily white ash and green ash here in our region, although blue ash, one of our other native ash species, is also highly susceptible to EAB. EAB has changed the structure and composition of our woodlands as it has removed ash from the landscape, opening up spots where invasive species could potentially take hold, such as garlic mustard, bush honeysuckle, or winter creeper. While EAB has significantly impacted the structure of our forests and woodlands, we hope that as ash does die out in the landscape, that we see native species pop up in the areas where we no longer have ash trees, and that we don't see invasives such as bush honeysuckle, winter creeper, or garlic mustard occupying those spaces where ash used to grow.
One of the biggest changes that we've seen in the forest out here at Raven Run in recent years has been the arrival of EAB, or emerald ash borer. This is an invasive insect that has moved into the area really pretty recently and just absolutely decimated our ash trees out here. Previous to the emerald ash borer arriving, ash trees were a big component of the forest out here at Raven Run. We had a lot of green and white ash trees. And you can see as you walk through the forest now, and you can really pick them out since they're dead or dying, our forest will look very different when the last ash trees are finally gone. And it's already starting to look very different, as they've died off and we've removed them. The reason why we end up removing most of our dead ash trees is that we are open to the public. We have, 50 to 60,000 visitors out here, and we are trying to mitigate potential safety hazards for the public. So as EAB started killing off our ash trees or causing them to have, a lot of structural damage, we did have to make that decision to remove those trees that were close to the trail that could drop limbs or, fall into the trail and potentially injure someone. We do like to leave the ones standing that are further back into the woods, because even though they have been infested with emerald ash borer and they are dead or dying, they still provide a valuable habitat component in our woods. A dead standing snag is a great place for woodpeckers, of course, come to mind, but there's lots of other creatures, insects, lots of other organisms that, kind of depend on that forest component. So we try to leave them, if they're a safe distance away from the trail, we do try to leave them there, but we've removed a tremendous amount of ash trees within falling distance of a trail. So with them previously being such a big component of our forest, we expect it to begin to look tremendously different. Those trees being removed from the canopy open up large patches of sunlight on the forest floor, which means that something else is going to come in and replace that tree. Here at Raven Run, unfortunately, a lot of the time that very well could be an invasive species. We probably are going to look into some kind of replanting effort in the future so that we can go in there and be proactive about deciding what we're going to add to the forest in place of the ash. Probably the last and final big concern that we have out here in terms of land management and keeping this park as healthy as possible is that we are open to the public. So we do have high visitation, and that comes with disturbance. As I mentioned before, not just disturbance that causes invasive species, but disturbance that causes high erosion in some areas and possibly, removal of sensitive species. Like, we have a lot of education to do in the spring sometimes when we have, these spring ephemerals coming up, these spring ephemeral wildflowers that, like trilliums, if you pick them, it may take them a long time to recover from that. And so just kind of doing our best to educate and minimize the impact of the high visitation that we do have is a really, really important component of sort of our forest health and our management plan out here.